It is the 21st of January, and 80 years ago today, the crew of the Five Grand, as a crew, conducted its last group mission together in Mannheim, Germany. Now, it was the actual 28th mission for my grandfather, Richard, aka Dick Jacobson, and it became the last for their command pilot, their primary pilot, Captain Unger. This is basically the mission where the majority of the group broke up, whether they went home or they went on another cruise. But as a collective group, this is basically what was left. There are 2 more missions after this, which I'll talk about later. But it's interesting to note, their very first mission that they did in Germany was Mannheim. So for their last as a group mission being Mannheim, are unique bookends for this B-17 Golf crew. Mannheim, as a reminder, here's Frankfurt, you go south, and then there's Mannheim. So now let's talk about that mission. Our second mission to Mannheim, and Unger's last mission, since he had flown 2 before we started. As it later turned out, it was also the last one for Jake and Bele, because Jake went to P-51s with Unger, and Bele became group navigator. Took off about 7:45, climbed to 12,000 feet, only to discover an oil leak in the number 3 engine, coaling, which was throwing a thin stream of oil back over the top of the wing. Unger conferred with the command pilot, and they decided the best thing to do was to turn back for another PFF plane at the base. We did this with a minimum of lost time and were able to rejoin the formation just as it crossed the French coast. We took back the lead from the deputy leader and continued on to our target, a marshalling yard at Mannheim. Bombing was done by PFF because of a 10-10 cloud coverage below us. During our bomb run, we hit a clear spot and got several pieces of flak in our right wing. Even so, it was a great deal better than the other time we went over the city. On the way back, the formation was forced to break up due to the low-hanging clouds over the channel, each plane coming back by itself. Saw no fighters and flak in only that one spot. Temperature was negative 52 degrees at 27,000 feet. Since it was Unger's last mission, we shot off all the flares we had left when we got back to over the base. Had a major for command pilot, some new officer for pinpoint navigator, and a different radio operator. We led the 486th on this mission. So there are 2 more missions that were conducted by Sergeant McBride, the waist gunner. And when those dates come up, I will share those missions with you. My grandfather was no longer a part of the group. The main pilot, Unger, was not a part of the group. So these will be 2 missions that were left for McBride. And given that he's the one who's maintained account of everything that happened, I think it would be honorable for him to have these mentioned, his last 2 missions. So I will do that. The next one I will talk about will be on the 9th. I will also, at some point, talk about my grandfather's experiences and his missions as a P-51 pilot. These are the list of missions he conducted with the P-51s, which he did 29 missions with the 3rd Scouting Force. But yeah, that'll do it for the crew of the Five Grand. Here was them again when they were still at Boeing Airfield, about to take the Five Grand. At this point, it was going to be taken by them all the way to Ireland. The plane did in fact change hands, and the crew was then ferried over to England from Ireland. And at that point, they took on other planes, but they are known as the crew of the Five Grand. You can Google search 5 grand World War II, and you will find their names and photos listed in the War Era History Museum websites. The actual name of the website eludes me at the moment. Right there in the middle was my grandfather, Richard, aka Dick Jacobson. There was the Captain Unger, well, at the time, Lieutenant Unger. And here is him with, I'm not sure if these gentlemen were also members of his actual crew, but that was my grandfather before he had passed, standing in front of one of the B-17 Gulf Flying Fortresses. So next time I come back, I'm going to be discussing first the final missions of Sergeant McBride. Given that he was the one who accounted for this, I think it's only right to share his last 2 missions that he accounted for. And then after that, I will come up with a plan for how to discuss those P-51 missions that my grandfather conducted. And I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on these ones because there is less information about them. I may even collect them into a single sharing and briefing, maybe highlight a couple of them, depending on what all I am able to find out about what these missions were. With that, for those who have been following this, thank you. I appreciate it. There is still more to come.